The Agents of E-Commerce Podcast. The Agents of E-Commerce Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Agents of E-Commerce podcast. Happy to have you folks back with me. Had a great conversation with Tom Davis, who has previously worked with Puma and Cartier and provides a lot of insight and perspective on what he describes as unlocking the potential of an e-commerce platform, really working with companies to help understand where they're underperforming, how to really leverage what he describes as his superpower of helping companies align on their vision and really execute. Please enjoy this conversation with Tom Davis. So welcome to the Agents of E-Commerce podcast. It's great to have you here. I'm excited. Today we have Mr. Tom Davis. Tom and I met back at Shop Talk most recently when he was working with my company, Miracle Target to Sell, in the personalization space for one of his brands internationally. And we got to talking and figured, you know what, this guy's got a lot to share. So I was really excited that he agreed to get on the podcast. And the topic today, as we describe it, is unlocking the potential. Tom is going to talk about some of his experiences most recently with some of the brands he's worked with over, almost like 10, 15 years. He's an old dog like me. And so, Tom, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me, Eric. So again, it's Tom Davis. So you can probably tell from my accent, I am American, but I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland. So I've been located here since 2016. And as you just said, I've been in this space. It's going on 27 or 28 years now. So certainly seen a lot in my timeline or my time frame.
Yeah. And so what, one question I always like to ask folks is how did you get into e-commerce? Because many folks of our age, this didn't exist as a career when we were leaving college. So what pivoted you here? And tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good question. I hear the question a lot. So for me, completely blind luck. I was attending Vanderbilt University, which is in Nashville, Tennessee, and basically graduated and was looking for a job. And I had a few former schoolmates who were setting up a business on the East Coast of the U.S. and had, long story short, they said, "Have you heard of this company called Amazon? They're selling books." And I didn't know much about that. And I said, "Sure, sounds cool. Yeah." And they said, "Well, we're thinking about making an e-commerce company to help retailers sell their products online. And would you be interested in coming and helping us sell the solution that they were going to build?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" So my first job was in 1997, and I was basically cold calling hundreds of retailers all over the U.S., asking them if they wanted to build an online website that would sell their products online. And that was the start of the journey for me. So completely blind luck. As I said, I was at Vanderbilt, and I was really doing an HR education degree. So I couldn't be farther from what I do today, but glad I've made it this far.
Wow. I can only imagine what it's like to sell someone not only a product, but a concept like the internet and digital and e-commerce. That would have been an interesting pitch.
Yeah, no, I think, the more and more I look back at it, it allowed me and still allows me to look back at that time. And I'm first to say I am not a salesperson. So I was terrible at the job, to be honest. And at that time, we basically just bought a catalog of phone numbers for all the big catalogers and brand retailers in the U.S. And I was going one by one, basically A to Z, calling these retailers and trying to talk to the general manager, the president of the company, and trying to learn how to communicate what it is that we were trying to do, because no one at that point really had online stores, or the concept of it really didn't exist. And Amazon was this first big news, or I guess brand that was coming out selling books at the time. I mean, it was nothing compared to what it was today, or what it is today. And, but I think what's pretty cool about the experience of being in that early is that even from that job, I take a lot of the memories good and bad, or frustrating, and I still apply them today. So, even the sense of how do you sell what the concept of e-commerce is, or omni-channel, or digital, whatever cliche we're using these days, still applies. And so honing that skill of trying to articulate what it is to people or executives or to brands at that time, and trying to understand what the value proposition is, what the selling proposition is, how this is going to handle customers. Literally a lot of my speech that I still use today stems from 1997, which is pretty incredible for me to still think that those dreadful cold calls shaped who I am as a communicator. So I look back at it as a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, the more things change, the more they stay the same, I think is the saying that we see. Awesome. So I think, that gets us into sort of your experience. So over your past 27 years, I think there's some themes that we discussed previously I wanted you to sort of tap into as it relates to what you've seen and, your approach, your methodology, I guess, in helping brands really unlock that potential.
Yeah. Well, as you said, I've been doing this for a while. So in between that first job and where I am today, there's been quite a few steps in my journey. So I think, to keep it simple and short, I've been really on what I call the brand side, except for my first initial stint, cold calling, being on the services or product side or platform side, I should say. I've been really on the brand side for well over 20 years now. And, some of the brands that I've worked at include, Tommy Hilfiger, Sirius Satellite Radio from the US, if people are familiar with that, Kenneth Cole. And then I kind of pivoted into going away from working in, let's call it North American brands, to taking on global jobs. So then I left kind of the North American space and went to the global space, working at Puma and really running and overseeing their digital businesses for about 6 years. And then most recently, I've spent 7.5 years at Cartier running their global e-commerce and digital businesses as well. So, it's been a pretty amazing journey. And I think during that journey, I've seen, basically three major, events, let's put it that way. There was a dot-com crash in the early 2000s. You've had the Great Recession not too long after that. And then obviously coming through COVID. So I think each one of those, let's call it macroeconomic situations, really shaped our industry and propelled it. It kind of separated, in some cases, the winners from the losers. And then you look at COVID, and it really just sharpened what it is that digital could do for brands. And I think is still shaping that going forward. And we'll probably see that for the next, 5, 10, 15 years. And I think what I've learned along the way that there, as you said, that the more things change, the more they stay the same. I think there are certain things about being in the roles that I've had that are similar between all of these brand experiences, and obviously each brand. I'll use the metaphor of each brand has a recipe for success, but I do think a lot of the ingredients that you use in these recipes for success are the same, and I think that that's what's really interesting to me is that as I said, I think my first I skipped over, but I went to graduate school at one point in the early 2000s, and my first brand retail job was joining Sirius Satellite Radio, building their e-commerce business. And that's a very different business than what I had been doing here at Cartier for the last 7.5 years. But a lot of the mechanics of that business of just selling aftermarket radios and subscriptions and, extensions to the radios that go in your car still apply to Cartier, even though the product is completely different, the customer is completely different, the scale, the businesses are completely different. But I think when you get into operating those businesses from a day-to-day perspective, there's a lot of similarities. And I think that that's what's really interesting as my career has progressed, the transferability of the learning and the know-how can be not passed on, but brought through from one brand to the next. Of course, you're adding new nuances and new insights along the way of each stop because each place is unique. But I do think after, as I said, 25 plus years of doing this, I've got a quiver which is full of lots of different arrows that can be deployed or used for my future, but as well as they're very, it's just, there's so many commonalities, as you said, between these brand experiences, which allows me to kind of come up with for lack of a better word, a playbook, at least for the first, few years in every brand. There's some tried and true things that can work really well, especially as you're trying to unlock value, or unlock potential, as I like to say.
Yeah, I think with that potential, I think the first, what it always starts with is the pain. Yep. So I think across these brands, there's some commonalities when it relates to the pain, what you saw when you first got there and what you determined was the best approach to solve.
Yeah, so great question. And I think I can be pretty specific about, maybe the way, or at least the last 15 years of my career, whether it was at Puma or at Cartier, I'm coming into a situation where the digital business, in a sense, is not performing at its full potential. So that's quite a different scenario than, jumping onto a brand that is performing at a high level and is already, I'll use another metaphor of a plane that's already at cruising altitude. I'm really coming into situations, or had been coming into situations, where we're just trying to get the plane off the runway. And I think when you come to that situation, pain is one way to look at it. I think, you can also look at it as just saying that, again, you have the ingredients for success, but they're just not being put together correctly. And you may need to add a few ingredients to come up with the right recipe. And I think everything that I go through or have gone through, when I enter these situations is really to try to take that the first 3 to 6 months to really just do what I call a state of the nation, which is trying to assess where everything is, knowing that I'm coming on board for a reason, which is to unlock that potential. So I generally come in hopefully with eyes wide open, without having a bias point of view, and except for the fact that I'm probably going to encounter some sort of, I'll use your word, pain, or something is not working in the way that it should be, or hasn't been implemented in the way that it could be to be most efficient. And so I start to kind of peel back the onion a bit and start looking at, okay, let's look at, the products. This is one-on-one stuff. So it's nothing that's, I think, rocket science, but it takes the due diligence to understand, to start looking at, let's call it, what is the brand? What is the DNA of the brand? What are the stories being told? Where are the commercial opportunities? What are the products being shown or sold? What's the technology that's being used? What's the organization look like? And you start to build my own story in my head of, are all of these different components aligned? And in some cases they're not. And I think that's where you can quickly identify, okay, there's a lot of potential here to be unlocked, even within the first year of joining a brand, is if you can find these incongruencies quite quickly, you can start to identify areas where you can unlock or alleviate or, free some of the potential, and that will then cascade into more and more opportunities as you start peeling back the onion more, because those are just, that's just top level stuff what you can figure out very, very quickly.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think often what you see, at least with any process, is there's always a bottleneck in the system. Yeah. And then when you unlock that bottleneck, it shifts somewhere else. So you're a little bit of a whack-a-mole situation here. But I do think that you're right. That approach of looking at the challenges in a holistic way and providing kind of maybe a new perspective, a new take could be pretty powerful. One thing we haven't hit on yet, but I know always has a big role, is the executives. Davis
Yep.
and their approach and their philosophy as it relates to digital and its priorities. I know you've dealt with a number of different groupings. So what would you have to say about that?
Well, yeah, you have to work through the executive committee or the CEOs or the C-level suite of any brand to accomplish what I think is the full potential of our digital opportunities. And I think, even just going back to the original story of me doing cold calls, of selling an idea and demonstrating back in 1997 on cold calls of what the full value or potential could be for a brand to be online, that still holds true when I'm talking to executive committees. So I think when I'm going through it, I'm doing the state of the nation with the teams, with whatever brand that I've been working with. How do you take that information, synthesize that information, and then showcase that to the executive team to show where there's unlocked potential and why there is potential? Because let's be honest, I don't think a CEO of a 5 or a 10 or a 15 billion euro company really needs to know the intricacies of how the product catalog works inside your omni-channel system. Maybe he or she would, but chances are that's not going to be their focus. So I have to find ways to simplify the opportunities, but not simplify the impact that these opportunities are going to have if we can unlock them. So a lot of my role has always been to try to take what I think is, the black arts of e-com or digital or omnichannel and simplify it into business terms. So, what are the KPIs? What are the opportunities? What are the threats? And then really building, in my case, I've been sitting on the commercial side under commercial leadership for the last 15 years. So everything is coming down to how do we drive more revenue? How do we drive better cost structures? How do we increase our profitability? How do we increase our turn rates? So when you start to understand what's inside of that, as I said, that original state of the nation of what is the product and what is the brand story and what does the organization look like? And then you try to marry that a little bit with technology. And then you start looking at the corporate goals of what you're trying to accomplish. Storytelling to me becomes a crucial art, and understanding how to tell stories to the executive committee to make sure that they see the importance and also the opportunity of digital and why it's so important, especially in today's day and age coming out of COVID, of what it means to the customer journey and the customer impact. I can't emphasize it enough. So I think any digital leader out there should be obviously working on operating and running the business day to day. But I think storytelling and understanding how to take complex situations and simplifying them so that the story doesn't get, clouded with too much jargon, because we have a lot of jargon in our business, and moves away from the jargon, but gets into the storytelling so that executives can synthesize an issue or an opportunity, within. If you can deliver that in less than 5 PowerPoint slides, I think you're doing a really good job. And I spend a lot of time working on that communication skill of mine.
Yeah, I'm a huge proponent of the somewhat lost art of storytelling, and I've been following a lot of recent discoveries around storytelling, specifically around data, and being able to take the analytics that you have and explain the results from testing in a way that supports that story, because that's the only way it's going to work, I think, in this particular environment. It's not just the story, it's the story supported by some really clear facts.
Well, yeah. I mean, I even take that further. I think the one aspect that I love data. So I love hard data. I love soft data. And I do think that in our roles, or in my role coming into a new organization, trying to separate fact from fiction is a really important first step, because when you're coming into a brand like a Cartier or a Puma or a Tommy Hilfiger, you have people who have been there for a long time. You have people who believe certain things, wrong or right. And it's important as when you're coming in from the outside to use your own data to help guide you in your decision making, because it's very easy for someone to, I don't want to say be brainwashed, but get caught up in what people think and what they believe, and what they feel. And I think that's important at some point, but initially I don't know what to think. I don't know what to believe, and I don't know what to feel. So I use data as a measuring stick for trying to understand facts. And I'm not, my job is not to tell people if the website should be purple or blue or green. What I try to do is separate that sort of belief, which is subjective, to what does the data say? What are our customers saying? What are the feedback loops saying? Are we taking user testing? Are we taking direct feedback from customers? Are we looking at hard data? And from there, trying to synthesize that sort of information to help me come up with conclusions. And I can't say enough about the importance of data. And data isn't hard data isn't everything, but it certainly gives you enough information to start looking further, or as I'll take that metaphor back, of peeling back the onion even further in certain topics, because data will show you opportunities, and then you need to go do a bit more fact finding after that. But without data, then I think we become there's too much subjectivity. So, and I'm not very comfortable with subjectivity, especially when I'm taking on a new role, because as I said, I think people have too many beliefs.
Yeah.
Which
the religious discussions are always the uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, I just, we're in a data world, and digital's data. So we do have, billions of pieces of data. So I think we should be using that to help us, and not be scared of it, of course. And again, there are parts of a DNA of a brand that, this website needs to be purple. Okay, fine. Then that's part of the DNA strategy. And we just have to take that into consideration with the data. But what you don't want to do is come in from the outside and fight a religion of beliefs, which are built on past histories. And I think it's important for me to come in with an unbiased view, to come in with a blank canvas to deduce what I think are the opportunities to unlock.
Awesome. So let's go from the micro and the data more outwards to the macro. And as you mentioned in your career, you transitioned to more global roles, and looking at those challenges, which I think are similar but somewhat unique. Maybe you could speak a little bit about what it's like to manage a global brand.
Yeah, well, it's significantly different, and I think I've had the pleasure to work in one organization, Puma, which was a very decentralized organization. So, a very large global brand, present in 80 to 100 markets around the world, but comes from a very decentralized structure, meaning that the markets or the regions have a lot of autonomy to make decisions and are empowered to shape a lot of their future, even from a brand position. And comparing that to coming into Cartier, which is very centralized and tries to have a unique position all around the world, no matter what market it's in. Even that unto itself, managing in the types of those organizations is different. And I think, what I've seen at the global scale or the global level is, one, you need to understand the structure. And you need to understand, is it a centralized structure? Is it decentralized? Do you have a matrix? Because sometimes your boss is not your only boss, or your teams are not your only teams. And then, you start to realize that in a global structure, no matter if it's centralized or decentralized, that you're working with teams all over the world. And so then you're getting into working with not only structure and organization, but you're working within cultures, and those cultures have their own needs and wants and beliefs and drives, and then ultimately those customers in those markets have very different buying patterns and needs as customers. So you start layering in, we're talking at micro and we're looking at data levels. I think when you start going at the macro level of managing in these complex global organizations, understanding people, for me, becomes one of the most critical key success factors. And I do believe, as I briefly mentioned, I was kind of in a HR, education program in university. I think it's one of the blessings in my life that helped me today, which is really understanding how people work and understanding how to get people to work and how do you get people to align on a vision, even though you're in a centralized or decentralized corporation. You all need to be moving from A to Z. And bringing people along for that journey is easier said than done, especially when you're doing transformation, which I spend a lot of time doing.
It's funny how those liberal arts degrees sometimes find their way of actually being valuable. But my undergrad is anthropology, and I actually it's aligned with HR in the sense that you learn to understand cultures and how they operate and what drives them. And again, it's very similar, and you see that company to company how the culture definitely plays a huge role in that personality of who they are, and it gets to brand, it gets to a lot of things. So it's funny that you're able to leverage the HR skills in this role.
At least I try. I can't say I'm not. It's just one of those things. I just just going on that. It's just for me, like I can try to be as successful as I want on my own, but I can never be as successful as I could be without the team. And I think it's really important to know that everything that I've done, I manage a certain way, which, is maybe different from some cultures, which it's just a team play, and you have to understand people and you need to understand what drives people and what makes them curious about work. Because work is just a part of your life, and you need to make sure. I'm a big believer in having fun at work. So it comes back to understanding people, understanding who I am, understanding the kind of people I want to be around all day, and therefore, if you can create that culture, a winning culture, we've been able to do amazing things, and all of us, you included, but also for myself, and the success that I've had over the last 25 years really comes down to the people that I've worked with, which is, the people I spend probably most of the time of my life with, outside of my family, which is always an incredible thought when I sit back and reflect on it.
Awesome. Looking backwards and now looking forwards, where you see e-commerce going, are there themes that have made themselves visible to you over your time that you are sort of tapping into now, and you're very more forward looking and where you want to be going?
So I think this is a big topic for me right now, and I'm having been in the space for as long as I have. I think as professionals we've adopted kind of a way of working with platforms and agencies, and at least specifically to e-commerce, if we're going to look there at the platforms, kind of there have been some tried and true platforms, whether it's a Salesforce or a Magento or new entrants like Shopify. There's IBMs, there was ATGs. I mean, there's been, so many through the days. And I think what I'm starting to see probably in the last 2 or 3 years, especially here in Europe, is that I think that there's going to be a big shift in how brands, especially global brands, approach e-commerce, or let's call it, digital businesses, because it doesn't, e-commerce is just the website, but like, let's think a little bit bigger than the website. Let's think about call centers. Let's think about applications. Let's think about store applications for employees, like clienteling or booking an appointment. Or even if we're going to start getting into, let's call it live streaming or influencer worlds. I think there's just digital is going through it's not a renaissance, but it's going to change its shape. And I think a lot of this change started with COVID and the fact that stores shut down. I think many businesses flourished during COVID, and now they've kind of come into a steady state, or maybe there's a little bellying out right now. But I think it's pointing towards a shift, and a shift is that the mainstay platforms that lots of companies have been using no longer can keep up with the innovation that's happening in the market. And the innovation is being set by the consumers. And the consumers have greater wants, greater needs. They're very fickle. I think customers, the switching cost between buying from one site versus another is just one click away. So how do you maintain customers? How do you engage customers? How do you keep customers inspired? I think is going to take a lot more creativity in the future. And what I think is going to happen is that many brands are going to move away from their trusted and true e-commerce platforms, and I think that there will be a new set of entrants that will come in, and we're seeing that now. I mean, I think if we look at headless or composable business or composable platforms that are coming out, I think they're starting to nip at the tails of, maybe it's a Salesforce or Adobe, which have kind of been, the heavyweights for a while. And I think what we're starting to see is a lot of new entrants that are very nimble, and a lot of this is coming from the Mock Alliance, I guess you could say. And I think it's going to take a bit of time for this to show itself. But when these new entrants come in and they bring on a couple brands that can demonstrate how you can create faster, deploy faster, reduce your costs, and improve your profitability, I think you're going to see a mass exodus of the way things were. That includes working with agencies, and even the way that you work with agencies, let alone the platforms, I think is going to change significantly. And I think this is going to be a 5, 10, or 15-year trend, which will probably see me to the end of my career. But I think what we saw at Shop Talk in Las Vegas was just the start of it. And I'm very curious to see what I see. I'm going to go to Shop Talk in Barcelona as well, so we can always do a follow-up to this, to what I see in Barcelona in June. But I'm just so convinced right now that there's going to be a major shift. And I do think that the brands and the digital leaders that have the stomach and the stamina to make this pivot can be the successors at the end of this, because I think the safe way is to stay with the status quo, but I think safe is not going to get you the new customer or tomorrow's customer. Because I look at the way my children, I'm sure with any children in your life, I've got 3 children, and between the ages of 16, 17, and 8 years old, and each one of them completely consumes the internet or digital space in a different way. And I can tell you that the way that they consume it and the way that they expect it to work is not the way I grew up in this industry. And so one of us needs to change, and it's gonna be me, because the kids are gonna, I see what my kids are doing, I see what's out there in the market, and I just think that there's a pivot that's gonna come, and it's gonna come very, very fast.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, being exposed to my kids and how they consume and the way they communicate and how they work digitally, they're digital natives, and that's very different from those of us that have some experience prior to that. Yeah. So I think understanding the trends there are going to be critical. And to your point, being able to support their unique needs in a way that we are struggling to understand is critical. And if the ecosystem and the services that exist out there don't do it, you're right, they're going to die. Yeah. So it's evolve or perish, I guess, is the moral of the story here. Totally. And maybe to your point, a follow up after Barcelona, that could be the place to do it, to have a part 2 of the conversation, because you're now testing, you're going to be having conversations there that I think will be interesting and now pointed.
Yeah. And what I'm really curious, to be honest, I don't know if this will happen, but I'm curious to see if there's just a different viewpoint on the market of like the solution providers in Europe. Like the big guys are all going to be in Barcelona.
Oh yeah.
It's going to be that second level businesses. I'm really curious to see what's there. And I'm hoping, because I think it'll be more fun to talk about, is that there's a different point of view versus the North American market, in terms of what people are talking about, what vendors are there, what people are focusing on. And I'm hoping to see that, because I think it'll be an interesting juxtaposition to talk about, what the US or North American point of view is on digital and commerce versus what maybe the European market is focusing on. And because I definitely feel it when I'm here, that it's very different. Like when I went to Vegas, I was like, oh, wow, okay. This is still very American focused or North American focused, where I'm wondering if this is more global focused. So I mean, I'll be proven right or wrong. I don't know which one it's.
Yeah. I mean, I see. I mean, working with a company like Miracle with a global footprint and seeing how the international folks and the brands that we work with just operate very differently because they're forced to, because they're international, because the borders are so close. And it forces kind of a bit of evolution on everybody that's involved in that ecosystem. Whereas here it's, it's America, and we have a more of a monolithic feeling, but I think we're a little bit behind Europe in that regard, at least from my perspective. And I think the other piece is that I'm seeing and I'm feeling is, to your point about this, the ecosystem changing and the monoliths, the SAPs, the Adobes who acquire these tech and try to pull it all together. The best of breed solutions now, these unique, interesting point problem solving solutions are going to be more and more. But then you have that problem of so many vendors, right? Which is just hard to manage. So it's this that constant pull is always there. I'll be interested to see if there's new solutions to create to solve that meta problem of you have all these great small tech. How the heck do you manage all these vendors in a way that's sustainable?
And that's the exact problem. So I mean, and this is going to be the paradox is that if you want to pivot, how do you orchestrate all of these small players together? I call it stitching them together, so, it's been funny. So one of the things that I've been doing for the last 3 months is I've been trying to, I call it interview, or kick the tires on every commerce platform that's out there. And so that's the Salesforce, that's the Magentos, we're using those, the VTEX. But, I've also talked to BigCommerce. I talked to Fabric. I talked to Shopify. I talked to Commerce Layer. I talked to Commerce Tools. Nacello is another one, I think. So, like, what I'm trying to do is also trying to, I keep asking them, what is your value proposition? BigCommerce is another one. I guess I did WooCommerce as well, so I don't want to forget it. And so I'm really out there because I'm very curious to see what the value proposition is going forward because, as you said, if you're sticking with the monolith, there's a value proposition and there's a trade-off of, maybe it's agility or flexibility or whatever you want to call it going forward. Whereas then you can go all the way from, let's call it a Salesforce stack, all the way down to the opposite side of the spectrum, which would be like a Commerce Layer, which is, they're just saying, we just want to be the cart. Well, two polar opposites, with obviously two value propositions. And, it's going to be interesting because I think if you pivot, let's use the example of Commerce Layer. I said to their CEO, Filippo, I said, you now need to make sure that e-commerce leaders like myself are comfortable putting a set of Legos together, so you need a lot of different pieces to complete the ecosystem. And so although it might be the right solution, you need to make sure that the e-commerce leaders are willing to take on that risk, that complexity. They have to stitch that together. And then you need to bring in agencies to help you manage that. And that just becomes a lot more complicated. And so you take that kind of value proposition where you may have speed, flexibility, agility to swap in and out partners or solutions, but also give you creative opportunities to deploy faster from an experience level, but requires a lot of management and oversight versus something like a Salesforce or even a Shopify that's just saying, do it all within one stack. And yes, there'll be some limitations to that stack of what you can really do from an enterprise standpoint for maybe where Shopify is versus where it's going, or geography or or globalization, which sometimes are a plague for the bigger ones. But it's a one-stop shop. And I think it's going to be really curious to watch digital leaders as they start to see what's happening with these, let's call them composable opportunities. And when are people going to be willing to take that risk, because the total cost could be lower, and the output of what I like to say of innovation could be higher. And it's going to be fun to watch. I think it's going to be really fun to watch. I think it's going to be fun to see how it shakes out. I think, as you said, there's so many players right now that the field of potential players will be culled at some point. Natural selection, as Darwinism will kick in. And but I do feel that there's going to be a pivot, and people are going to move away from these stacks. And the question is, to what? And what is going to be the recipe that digital leaders of the future are going to gravitate to once there's an established playbook? And right now there isn't, so there's too much room for interpretation. But a couple brands are going to get it right, and then I think it's going to be infectious.
So I'll be really interested to hear, you're testing this hypothesis. I think the other piece that you bring up, and I always have a struggle with, is the unique value proposition that some of these platforms, their ability to effectively communicate it. It came up at one of my last podcasts with the guy who was the former CMO over at VTEX. You mentioned, he's building, I think we talked about him. He's building this whole business around companies suck at this. They're really bad at this. Visually telling the story, communicating it. Miracle, another example, Target to Sell. We're struggling with it. All of us are really bad at really defining and distilling.
Yeah, I was just talking to, Jeffrey Barnett, the former head of Demandware, earlier in the week, and I think that this is, what I see in the solution market is that people are selling solutions, and their sales pitch is, here's the solution, but they're not actually asking me what my problems are. And therefore the sales pitches go flat, because just because not you guys at Miracle, but just in the proverbial you, and this is what I challenged people at the Mock Alliance, or Mock 2 last year, was that just because you have a cool solution doesn't mean it needs to be, it doesn't need to exist. What we need to be doing is, what are the problems out there, and do we have solutions for those problems? And me as the business leader, I'm trying to solve problems all the time. And so I'm looking for solutions that solve that. And I think that that's sometimes the misalignment between the solutions that are out there and what their value proposition is versus what my problem is. And that's where the storytelling needs to become a little bit, or maybe not in storytelling, but the platform or the solution itself needs to be a little bit more focused on solving the problems. And and I think it's true. It's we use Target to Sell, and it's a great solution. But it's not the solution for everything, right? So I think it's important to understand what your solution is, what problem it's trying to solve. And this goes for any software provider out there, and especially when you go to the big e-commerce guys, is what is the value proposition, and making sure that the value prop solves the bigger problem for brands. And if you can find that, connection or the right fit, then you're in a great space. And if you're not, it's okay to say that you're not the right solution. I think that's where people have to walk away.
And now we're pivoting back to unlocking the potential, but in this case, more for the on the vendor sides, which is relevant. So there's problems abound. So that's good stuff. So I think with that, it's a good opportunity maybe to wrap this as we look to the future. Yeah. And Tom, this has been excellent. Thank you so much for making this time. If folks want to find you, I'll have this links in the description of this podcast. But where can they find you?
Oh, they can always find me through LinkedIn. That's probably the easiest way to do that. So if anybody wants to reach out on LinkedIn, you can just send me a message, and more than happy to connect. Or you can send me an email, and my email is tom@macalister.co, and Macalister is MACALISTER.co. So a little bit of a funny spelling on that one, but LinkedIn might be the easiest way to do it, since that doesn't seem to change for the last 20 years.
Awesome. Yep. Well, Tom, again, thank you so much, and look forward to seeing what you have to share after Barcelona.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.